Radio, a podcast produced by Winding Trails Media for writers by writers.
Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas, author of Crazy Things, working right now on a science fiction book and on a knife fighting book. Yes, they are not related to each other.
So far, you
never know. Anyway, and with me today is my lovely co-host.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Kayembe. I write paranormal romance under the pen name Kaseka and Vita. You can find me on Twitter at NKKAYEMBE. And then.
Brad R. Cook, author of the Iron Chronicles, which is Iron Horseman, Iron Zulu, and now Iron Lotus. Do check it out, please. You can find it all at bradrarcook.com. And because we're coming to the, next year, do be on the lookout for all the fun and exciting stuff that I've got coming. And check my website because there's a free story for you.
Ooh. Jen.
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. I have books on Amazon, picture books, one called Dog Park. And soon I will have my first full novel-length story, a fantasy that I've mentioned here before. It's called Threadcaster. It's not available for pre-order or anything yet, but check in March, because that's when it'll be there.
Okay, and also with us?
I'm Melanie Lucas. I have taken something of a break from writing, but I hope to get back to it soon. I'm trying to write science fiction and fantasy.
She's trying to help me merge these two houses together.
Yeah.
And also,
Vidora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis and Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. And I'm vice president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime. Well, by now I'll be president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime.
Hooray!
So are you going to succeed Klingon style? Is that what you're talking about?
No.
You keep what you kill.
Just my honest vote. That's all.
Lovely. And with us today are also two guest panelists. Sorry, my mind just went blank as I'm trying to picture Klingon style.
Like Klingon style, but with a backlist.
Chanel Etienne. I write sci-fi and fantasy.
And I'm James Young. I'm back. And I write sci-fi and alternate history. The alternate history and sci-fi both have free novellas up. The free novella for the sci-fi is A Midwinter Ski. The free novella for the alternate history is Pandora's Memories. And that's available on all Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Amazon for both of those.
Excellent. In today's topic, we're going to talk about, first off, we're going to discuss a little bit about, I'm going to butcher your name ahead of time. Of course, you're already dead. So, Georges Méliès, who was a screenwriter. And also, we're going to talk about our own rules. Over the last year, we've talked about, or throughout this entire season, we've talked about other people's writing rules. Well, now we're going to talk about our personal writing rules. First off, and I'm going to turn this over to our two historical people, or actually, I'm sorry, I've got three historical people now in the room. Yay! Who is Georges Méliès, and why should we care about him?
Well, do you care about science fiction?
Of course I care about science fiction.
Do you care about fantasy?
Yes, we care about fantasy.
Well, then he's the guy who wrote the screenplay on it. He was the main fellow who started so many different techniques that are used throughout the ages in science fiction films. And we're talking about something that was 114 years ago, yes. 1902, wow. A Trip to the Moon, based sort of loosely on Jules Verne's
novel
From the Earth to the Moon, which had come out long before this. That was at the end of the Civil War that Jules Verne's book came out. But Méliès had been a theater owner and was fascinated by magic and theater magic especially. And so he could use flash powder, for example, and you'll find that in his little film, A Trip to the Moon, which is only 15 minutes long. Watch it. It's on YouTube in black and white and something that's almost unwatchable, and also in hand-colored glory.
Yes. It was glorious.
It was.
And it is a funny little piece, but it has so many different things that are still used today, like stop action animation to make the creatures disappear. And he uses sex. I mean, look at all of those girls wearing nothing, well, wearing tights.
Yeah.
Little, practically skimpy little costumes.
Especially for 1902, guys.
This was
Risque.
really
Those are pinup
Yes, but it is
costumes.
before the ratings board, which is
Yes.
how he got away with it.
well, also, it was in France.
That's true.
He would not have gotten away with it in the United States at all, I'm pretty sure. Because the main movies that had been done before then were Edison, who did the very first one. It's a very short little film called The Kiss. And that was just absolutely scandalous. People went mad over it, but they watched it. And
Just
then
note, if anybody wants to read my book and you're scandalized by it, just keep reading my books.
And then there were others like the beheading of Mary Queen of Scots, and others like the Great Train Robbery, which is generally considered to be the first actual kind of storyline plot. Well, Trip to the Moon is the first science fiction storyline plot.
Yep.
Would anybody like to recount just what that plot is?
I will give it a go.
All right.
All right. The plot of
A
Trip to the Moon is about a bunch of scientists who are wizards, and they propose shooting themselves to the moon in a giant cannon.
Yep.
There's no seatbelts. That was the thing that I liked about it.
And they're in a bullet.
They're in a bullet. They
Yeah,
pack themselves, a bunch of beautiful women, pack them into a giant bullet and load them into a giant cannon. And then with a parade, they blast themselves into the eye of the moon, which bleeds a lot when they
Only
land.
in color, yes.
Only in color, yes. They put a bunch of blood on the moon because the moon is a man's face.
Yes.
Head
And
wounds
they
are always
of
gushers.
course.
Yeah.
When they land on the moon, they find a fantastical land with umbrellas that turn into mushrooms, and then moonmen that look like bipedal fish monsters.
Yes.
Yes.
And the fish monsters ends up, they have a whole society up there and they arrest them and put them on trial, but if you whack them with an umbrella, they explode in smoke. Which allows them to, all the old scientist men who are now dressed as scientists, not wizards, to beat their way out and get back in their bullet, and then literally fall back to Earth from the moon.
Yep.
They didn't understand
They
gravity.
didn't understand gravity.
No.
One of them's actually on the outside, holding on to a string as it goes down.
Yes.
It lands on him, but he makes it. Spoiler alert. And they bring a fish monster with them just by happenstance and get to show him to all of their friends, and then they get medals.
Shaped like the moon.
And there's at the very end, the leader of the party, the one who killed the fish monster king with his umbrella, gets a statue, and all the sexy ladies dance around it.
Yes. And I'm going to
Excellent
say,
retelling.
Thank you.
yes,
Yeah.
very well
Yes,
done.
it was an excellent
I tried to
retelling.
include my favorite parts.
And in addition to that, one part of it made me think of Star Trek Into Darkness, where they
Fish
jump off the
monster.
cliff.
They
Yeah.
jump off the cliff.
Yeah.
And
well,
also
you don't have-
to avoid all the politicizing that I totally would have done if I'd retold it.
Yes, it is definitely lives up to its time period.
Yes.
I will say on the novel version, which
Wait,
is
by time period, you do mean steampunk, right? Because it is a total steampunk
Oh,
movie.
yes.
yes, it is.
They had giant telescopes.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah.
It is
They had a
hands
cannon that
down,
you launched
it is
a
the first
spaceship?
steampunk movie.
Yes.
And they were all wearing top hats.
So do know that science fiction and fantasy started with steampunk.
There you go.
I believe it.
Well, and Jules Verne, hello, steampunk.
yes, definitely.
But one of the things I'm going to just briefly, before we get to talking about our own rules and then bringing George into all this picture, no pun intended there, I'm going to say the novel by Jules Verne, for its time period, turned out to be quite a bit scientifically accurate. Okay, the part which is clearly not is being able to launch yourself by gunpowder to the moon. But as far as in the book, at least if I remember correctly, there was zero gravity or very low gravity. They did get there in a capsule, and so forth. There were certain aspects that turned out to be 100% correct on this, including how long it would take to get to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think he got even the weight of
I think
the
he did.
thing of the rocket, right?
yeah. So now we have explained to the moon. How about our own rules to the moon? What are some of your rules? I'm going to look at my own co-host across the way. I'm going to pick on her first.
All right. Well, so I was thinking about this before we did this episode, what my kind of rules for writing would be. And I realized as I made this list that I kind of have a series of influences about my writing philosophy, and that a lot of the rules on here are less about the mechanics of writing than it is about what is important to remember as a writer. And so a lot of mine are self-care or things that I think are part of the heart of why you write. So can I actually tell you where my writing philosophies come from? Because a lot of these rules stem from those. So Julia Cameron wrote a book called The Artist's Way. Pat Schneider wrote Writing Alone and with Others. Octavia E. Butler wrote some essays in her short story collection Blood Child. Anne Lamott wrote Bird by Bird, and Natalie Goldberg wrote Writing Down the Bones. And those have had a tremendous impact on me as a writer. So, for example, Pat Schneider says a writer is someone who writes, and that's one of my writing rules. A writer is someone who writes, so it doesn't matter what it is that I write so long as I am writing. And that kind of ties into my whole self-care, don't beat yourself up so much, which comes from Julia Cameron. So those are two examples, I guess. Octavia Butler says persist. So even when I was going through a fallow point in my writing, I tried to at least do something. Even if it was small, it didn't matter. And Julia Cameron's really the one that taught me that all writing counts. So be kind to yourself as a writer. Those are more my self-care philosophy rules. They're not to do with the craft, but they're important to how I function as a writer.
And our own mental health is a big part of our writing.
That is a big part. I actually have a bunch of rules, I guess, that I like to follow. And I talk about them all the time, so I'm sure this list will not be a surprise to anybody.
Are you giving your whole list now?
Yes.
Oh,
starting with the 33rd one. No. No.
Sorry.
I'm just going to give a couple because I could never
Starting
remember
with the 45th declination.
Yes. No. So the biggest one
PC's
is
599.
is that I write and edit later because you got to get it down on the page. Another big one for me is that. Oh crap!
Oh no, you forgot all your rules.
No, I didn't forget all of them. I forgot the one I'm trying to get to. So basically, starting as close into the action as possible. We all know that one. It's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm a big person on pace, so I want a quick, fast pace. I don't want anything to be slowed down. But one of the big ones for me is that I am going to put into my work a certain meaning or a certain, and I'm going to stick to that. Consistency is a huge one with me. I don't really care about the rules. I care about being consistent. Because if I break one rule and I only break that once and I don't break it again throughout, then I keep it, if I'm flip-flopping back between breaking the rules in a book, that's going to appear weird. If I'm just consistent, nobody cares. So if it's spelled a certain way on page 1, I want it spelled that way all the way through. And that goes for second book and third book. I want it to be consistent with the books that have come before. Like, I don't care if it's, supposed to be right or whatever. I want it to be consistent. A few of those. There are a couple others that I like to follow. I try and write one thing at a time. It keeps my focus, keeps me knowing where I'm going. And then I don't care about word count. I don't care how many words I write in a day, and I don't care how many words I've written total until I get to certain points where I want to track myself. So when I think I'm halfway through the novel, good to know. Let's see where my word count's at, because that's going to tell me if I am actually in the middle of my novel or just the first third.
Congratulations, you got 2 chapters.
Yeah. Exactly.
What was novella?
Exactly. So, those are probably some of my rules. I probably have a few more. I'll think more on it and throw a few more out. But those are some of my bigger rules.
Kathleen?
That's funny. Those are things that I didn't write down, but a lot of those rules are mine. Like, write first, edit later.
Yeah.
That's definitely one of mine. Like, if the first draft is not done, there is not much going back. Like, I just try and go forward until the draft is done.
Well, Fedora talks about her way all the time of writing and then going back through and going through all that.
Yeah.
I go over it
Yeah.
time after time after time, like every day.
Yeah. And I can't
Over
do
not
that.
all of it, but the last few hundred.
Another one for me
You're
is
right,
not
does that too.
another one for me is not to waste time writing other things. So they talk about doing like interviews with your characters and stuff like that, and I love the idea, and I'll totally think about it. I don't write them down because writing that period of writing time can be used to actual writing.
Yeah.
So I'm weird like that too. I think about things like that, but I don't necessarily do an official article with my character or anything like that because I'd rather actually write the next chapter.
The other thing is, I've also recognized that I'm a one project at a time person. So that's not an official rule, but it's part of my process.
Yeah.
James?
I really enjoy hearing everybody who says one project at a time. You almost have some well-disciplined muses. My muses are a bunch of jerks.
Yeah.
Because they will throw stuff at me like I'm like, oh, wait, I'm working on Project A. Why are you talking about Project J? They rhyme. Don't you want to know about this great scene that we're now going to lay out for the next 30 minutes and keep the internet browser of your brain gummed up? And then it's also the write now, edit later is something that, as a person who's not used to do that, I am starting to come around to it. That also takes discipline. I used to have a saying,
It does.
one draft, haul ass. That kind of like strafing when you strafe a target, you just keep going. And it would always get me in trouble in school because there'd be stuff that it's going along well. I misspelled one word. Why didn't you read back through this? But I'm also a procrastinator, so that's probably part of the problem.
Yep.
And I have realized now if you just start getting the stuff on the screen and say, okay, I'll get to it later, that does greatly help the production, but it is something that you have to drive yourself into doing. I'm not there yet. As my wife can testify, she's also an author. Not there yet. That's why she has her series complete, and I'm just now starting the sequel on my sci-fi series.
No, it's true, actually. It's a hard thing to be able to do, to be able to keep writing and let that bad sentence sit there.
Yeah.
Knowing that you'll go back. Oh, that was another one. Take two sentences, combine them together, because I
Yes.
guarantee you can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I was-
When we get to mine, we'll talk about hamsters and squirrels and so forth. Go ahead.
that whole one project at a time thing, I should qualify that. I have one longer project going right now, but I'm totally writing fanfics on the side. But like the main thing is though, I have one thing that is my focus.
Yeah.
And I can't like edit something during part of the day and then write something completely new and different that is something I was working on the day before for another part of the day. I found out I can't do that.
I can't do that either. That's tough with me because I have two primary hats, the drawing hat and the writing hat. Drawing hat and writing hat can't coexist.
Really?
I usually, unless it's doodling for the story. But if I'm changing, because there's so much storytelling and illustrating, if today is a day to work on my novel, then it's a day to work on my novel. It's novel day. And unless there's a obvious break in the middle. Like, we like to go to Caldi's, our coffee shop, and write on Thursdays. If I know I'm going to write when I get to Caldi's, it's okay if I drawing hat up until that point, because there's an obvious transition. One of my big rules is if you're not getting it done, go to a coffee shop. Because the transition of location is enough in my brain to say, okay, you're done with what you were doing, and now it's time to do this. Because this is the place you do that. And it doesn't have to be the same seat or the same shop or anything. It could be with people or without people. It's just that practical changing of location and surrounding yourself with new things is enough to sort of jog one hat loose so I can put the other one on.
Dovetail.
No.
Okay.
I actually am dovetailing. So I totally get that, but for me, coffee houses are great places to plot, not the best places to write. And the whole browser thing of having a ton open and different projects. I have a ton of projects going at any given moment, but like Kathleen was saying, I have one I focus on, but I'm a plotter. So I've got outlines laid out for the next projects that are coming up, And I totally have those moments where I'm working on A and Jay is totally like, whispering, I'll open up that document and I'll, take some notes in it or something. But, when I sit down to write, I have 3 working times a day, and 2 of them are dedicated to as much writing as I can. And that is where I focus in. And I'm going to write one project, I'm going to write it till it's done, and I might switch, like I was writing a short story, I stopped halfway through, and I'm finishing another short story now, and I'll go back to the other short story in a second.
Mm-hmm.
It's just which one was flowing better. But, there's one project, like when I get up in the morning or when I'm starting really late at night, one of those two, I'm going to focus on one thing.
I'm going to jump for a second. Well, not for a second. I'm going to go ahead and throw in a rule. Just, the one that made me think about it was the self-care. One of my rules is The Shining is a cautionary tale. Basically, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. All work and no play also makes Jack a bit crazy, cranky, and increasingly likely to be a homicide victim. If you try to focus too much on the writing to the point, and the reason why I bring that up, so I've mentioned my wife a couple times. My wife, Nancy Young, is a fellow author. I have my own writing office, mainly because she's hoping that one of these days all the books in there will crush me. She has mentioned that she's hoping that there's an earthquake so she can come in and say, do we have too many books now? And I swear to her, I'm going to be like, just call the ambulance. My answer's still going to be no. But she swears up and down that, and I've apparently done this with witnesses on one of our writing groups, that I have this look that makes her think of, Wendy, darling, love of my life, when she comes in, she interrupts me like mid-thought. And I will freely admit to it, like if I'm in the middle of, when I was working on my master's thesis, I was really bad about it. If I'm in the middle of a paragraph, that is sometimes an indicator as time to take a break, where just getting interrupted basically makes you look at somebody like,
yeah.
We can't see for the listening audience, but you can imagine exactly what sort of depth stare
I totally
that
agree.
was.
Do not knock on my door while I'm writing.
Oh yeah.
No.
If you
Yeah.
hear
My
me
front door-
typing,
Yeah, my front
leave me alone.
my front door is near where I write.
Mm-hmm.
And the most annoying thing in the world is that guy who's selling magazines or like selling something. I cannot stand that guy.
do you have a no soliciting sign?
I do not have a no soliciting.
Yeah, I have a
sign.
no soliciting sign right by the doorknob, and to me, that is my weapons-free sign. If you knock on my door with my no soliciting sign right there, the person who's going to answer the door is not someone you're going to like to meet.
Exactly.
Oh goodness. I was gonna say, I have ADD. If you interrupt me when I am in hyperfocus, it is on you what happened.
I would say, yeah, I'm with you on that, because the telephone's my other issue, and when I get to mine, I'll go with more details. But I still remember a short story I was working on to this day. This happened back in '94. I still remember this. I am in the middle of writing this mystery short story. Guy has his finger on the gun, aimed at my protagonist. Finger is pulling back. Phone rings. I had to answer it because I didn't have caller ID and I didn't know what was important. Hi, can I sell you? By the time I finally hung up, I couldn't tell you what was happening in that story at all. It was gone. Go ahead, and then Dora.
Between Jennifer and James and Brad, their conversations about what works for them, that was the last self-care rule that I hadn't read, actually. Do what works, not what you think should work. There is no guilt or shame involved in this process anywhere. It need not apply. So one of the things that has helped me most as a writer is recognizing that it's okay to do what works for me. And it's not going to be the same as what works for other writers. Like, I'm not like Stephen King. I can't go sit down every day, write 2,000 words, and potentially just call it a day. Like, I will sit down, I will write until I'm at a stopping point that's usually 4 hours and thousands of words later, and then I might not write for a couple days. But that's how I work, and there's no shame in that.
Yeah, don't fight yourself. You won't succeed.
There are all kinds of plans for writing, William Makepeace Thackeray used to write exactly 1,000 words a day. And if that meant stopping in the middle of a sentence, that's what he did.
Oh my gosh.
What madman?
Yeah.
Blasphemer!
Although
He
I
wrote
will
to
say-
make money, very simply. He
Yeah,
wrote
yeah.
to make money.
I will
Did he
say,
end up in a sanitarium?
No, he ended up rich.
About the burn for heresy, maybe? I mean,
no. About that
Oh,
though,
I'm
I
not
have
finished.
found it helpful though to write to a point where I know what's coming next and then stop, because then
Oh,
it's
yeah.
easier to start the next day.
Yeah, agreed.
Not another sentence though.
Oh, we'll
No,
get to
not
me. Wait till
mid-sentence.
you get to me. Okay, go ahead.
Perfectionist.
Or mid-paragraph.
I tend to think of projects in two ways. That is, there are long-term projects and there are short-term projects. And a long-term project, if I know how the black moment is, I'm not going to forget it. It will be in my mind until I write the sucker. And I don't write the sucker until the time for the sucker in the book. So that's a long-term project, and that I can pick up any time that I want to. But if some idea strikes me and nags at me, and you know what I'm talking about, I know you do. You get this idea, and it pounds you in the head till you do something about it. If it's a short-term project, I will go ahead with it. If it's a long-term project, I'll write down the black moment and drink a glass of wine and wait till the feeling goes away.
Go ahead, Brandon.
This year, I've actually done something different. So everyone knows that I'm a plotter. But this year, I would have like really vivid, crazy dreams. And a couple of times I would wake up in the middle of the night. Now, you know, for those of you who know me, my middle of the night is like, 5 in the morning or something like that. So I wake up then, and I would literally start writing my crazy dream. And then I would just keep going with it. And I have produced, almost an entire novel that way.
Wow.
Of one story, and then 4 short stories this year.
Are these the
from
ones that are
dreams.
coming out?
No, actually not. We'll see what happens to them.
Thank you, Sigmund Freud.
Yeah, no, they're all
Seriously?
crazy like that.
Or
And
Paul
some of them are now little
Yeah.
plotted short stories and stuff like that are just too fun. But that's not normally the way I operate. But sometimes, and then the other one was giving myself the freedom to wake up at 5 a.m. because I had a really great idea, and then write that out, and
And
like
get
turning on-
get out of bed and do it.
Yeah, just roll out right there, open up the laptop, start pounding away on the keys, and get that thought out onto the paper, and then that became actually a really cool paragraph in my book.
Cool. Well, my rules.
Yeah.
A couple of different things. Number one, I will stop in the middle of the sentence on purpose. This is a tip I learned from Ben Bova. It is a psychological fact that you will always want to complete a...
That is so mean.
That is rude.
It is. And everybody, you listen to
Sentence! No, sorry.
And what happens is, the next day when you come back to your writing, you won't have that whole entire, what am I going to write next? You read through the last paragraphs you were writing, and your mind will automatically want to complete that sentence, and then you'll keep going. It works. It's kind of like the idea of where you were talking about stopping mid-paragraph. Number 2, I don't know if this is a if this is an urban myth or not, but it is said of Isaac Asimov that he would have 9 typewriters, all working on different stories. And when he got stuck with one, or he got bored with one, he turned to the next typewriter and go on that project. And we know how much he produced in all the general stuff that he produced. So I've
You
gotten
just
to
didn't
the
have
point.
browser files.
Yeah, this is
We got that
pre-computer.
now, yeah.
This is pre what we have today.
But that also sounds awesome. You could have like a swiveling desk chair.
I know. I want
and swing around and yeah.
Melanie
Like
will tell you. The
Blind
nursing,
novels.
yeah, Melanie will tell you. There's the nursing home where my mom's at. There is a table in a foyer that is a big horseshoe. I tell her I want that for my writing desk. That way I can set up monitors and everything around and do exactly what you just said. Just turn the thing.
You have 2 cats.
I've got 3
I have
cats, actually.
3 cats, actually.
So, yeah, this isn't going to end well unless you got room closed. You know that, right?
Yes, there's some reasons for a door.
Yeah. I'm trying to head that train wreck off at the pass
Yes.
before...
One thing I've gotten from Brad recently, as I've been relaunching my writing career, Brad being the former president of St. Louis Writers Guild and myself as president, volunteer organizations, even if you are doing volunteer work and you're not getting paid, they can turn into 40-plus hour a week jobs very, very quickly. And I walked up to Brad one day, and if you've heard this on previous broadcasts, I understand, because I walked up to him and go, how the hell did you ever write anything? Because this man was getting out novels while he was president. And he laughed maniacally, and it took him a day or 2 to get back to me.
Yeah, which I next saw you, but yeah.
Yeah, next time he saw me, and he goes, okay, I didn't really mean to laugh. I'm like, yes, you did. I didn't, and I fully understood.
I didn't mean to laugh, I did it.
Yeah.
But I meant to laugh, and I meant to also give him advice.
He was too busy laughing at
Laugh
the
too
time.
hard.
So, thanks to Brad's advice, I have actually cut off answering emails, telephone calls, and sadly, I still have to keep my cell phone by me because my mom is in a nursing home in dementia ward and has been on hospice now for over a year. So, I'm not expecting anything soon, but because of all that, I have to watch for telephone calls.
Yep.
You never know. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I don't answer telephone calls, emails, Facebook, the door, you name it, until my writing hours are over with. Or unless I'm on
This
lunch
is
break.
one of the reasons why I love writing late at night.
Yeah.
Because the internet dies out and there are no distractions. Everyone's gone to sleep. No one's calling me. You know, TV sucks. You know, so like...
You don't
there's-
have Netflix?
Well,
No, I'm talking actual TV.
yeah.
Yeah, Netflix is a whole other, you know,
Yeah.
thing.
Also
But,
a different cutoff.
You know, I'm really not trying to stay on the internet for any length of time or anything like that.
Right.
And then that allows me a good couple hours to write.
I used to do that, and it's one of the things I've noticed with my, as I've been doing a relaunch. I used to write from 4 in the morning till 7, then have to go to work, and then I'd be late night writer after that. So it's like I just had a quick nap in between. That quick nap time is gone. Now I'm basically, thanks to Melanie now driving herself to the train station to go to work, I'm basically 5 in the morning until I have to go to work, or actually as this is now airing, I've lost that job. So it's now 5 in the morning until I decide I've got to eat, or 5 o'clock p.m. And I'm straight through. I'll go ahead and let you interrupt, and I've got a couple more I'm going to talk about.
I wanted to go back to your Isaac Asimov typewriter situation. Something that I wouldn't consider a rule, but it is something that I do now that I recognize consciously as something that is helpful to my writing is Barbara Scher, who is also highly influential to me in my living philosophy, has what she calls vocation stations. And she says they're good for people who are like me, who have a lot of different interests. And basically what it is a vocation station is a station that you have set up so that you could just sit down and immediately start doing whatever that task is that you've set up there. And I've kind of taken that into my writing and made it as easy as possible to start writing in any given situation. So I carry a journal on me and pens, and I have a little idea pad. So if it's a little thing and I don't want to get out my huge journal, I can just get out the small thing and write it down. On my computer, I have different screens that I can use for different types of things. So I have the current writing project up, full screen, so I can't see anything but that project. And that is the screen that I close my laptop on. So when I open it, the first thing I see is story I want to be writing. So make it as easy as possible is something that I think is really smart about what he did.
I totally agree with you. And as like yourself, Kathleen, I'm ADD. Actually, I'm ADHD. I've got plenty of initials. But, so I've stopped fighting myself with it. I've decided to go with it and use that to my advantage, which is why I can work on multiple projects as needed. But like Brad was talking about, I've got a primary project I'm focused on. The other ones I'm doing side bits if needed. Two last things, and then I'm going to turn this back over to James, who I think is who's raring to go over there.
Yeah, this isn't an actual list.
Okay. Well, this is coming off my top of my head. So, being the ADHD LD guy here, I want to get it out before I go squirrel. And that
I'm sorry,
is-
what were you talking?
Yeah, exactly.
Said the other people. with
So,
ADD.
Hamster decided to wow, almost did forget.
So
One of the influences on my writing is also Gene Roddenberry, also Earl Stanley Gardner and Charles W. Chestnut. I'm going to go with Earl Stanley Gardner for a minute, because not Earl Stanley Gardner, with Gene Roddenberry. Gene Roddenberry. In the last episode I talked about Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry versus J.J. verse a little bit, just briefly. But in a interview with Gene Roddenberry, what he would always say is, my goal is to entertain, make you laugh, and when your guard is down, then slip in a heavy idea or two. And so that's what I try to do. I don't always succeed, but I try. And then finally, and my final thing to say is, you, Kathleen, talked about perseverance. You've all heard, well, James has not heard this unless he's listened to our podcast before he came on, but you've all basically heard me say this. My philosophy, period, with everything I try to do, is this. Don't worry if you work hard and rewards are few. Remember, the mighty oak was once a nut like you. James.
I will freely admit I did not listen to the podcast beforehand because I wanted to come in cold. I rarely allow myself to be surprised like that, but I thought it'd be new and different because otherwise I'd be trying to live up to someone else that you have before.
that's okay. We already adopted you. You're not going home.
She's already
Folks,
this was up.
If you're listening and you have not seen James Young post anything on Facebook for a
That he
couple
is
of months,
completely voluntarily and no wrong has been done. Do not call the police.
wow, that sounded sinister. So, on to the writing rules. Research or experience. This is basically a case of you only get, everybody talks about you have one chance to make a first impression. You have a chance within the first 50 pages or so to convince the reader you're either competent or a moron. And you can either do this with experience or research, because you should write what you know, but there are some things that you can't know, or if you do know, unfortunately, it's a high, shall we say, tuition cost. I write military sci-fi. I was at a con where we were talking about, do you have to have been a combat veteran to be able to write combat? I stated no, not a combat veteran. I am a veteran. But I had another author, Peter Grant, who I respect greatly. Peter is a South African, and he fought in Angola. And the thing that he said was, well, combat is like sex. You can have all the thought process you want beforehand, but until you've actually done it, you don't know what you're talking about. Which was interesting because he's on a panel with 3 or 4 of us who had not been in combat. And the thing that I said was, well, no, I think if you sit there with research, fear is universal. So if you've ever been nearly in a car accident or you've had near-death experiences outside of someone trying to play bullet dodgeball with you, you can understand what that fear is. And the rest at that point is semantics. But it's very much a case of you have to research what the combat of your period is. Because the last thing you want to do is be writing a novel about the Civil War and talking about submachine guns.
Yeah.
See part about you are an idiot. And Ian Slater is the author that comes to mind with this. I'm sure one of these days Ian Slater is going to find me and punch me in the face because I talk about him all the time. He was a writer from the 90s who wrote World War III novels. And the problem with Ian Slater is he did not do research. This was not Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy's the guy who did research, to the point where, he actually got in trouble with the government because they sent some people to ask him, like, how did you know that? And Tom Clancy guessed well. I mean, having been there, done that, you can extrapolate some things if you pay attention. The thing with Ian Slater is he'd have things like having F-15 Eagles, which is a type of U.S. military plane, land on carriers, and you can't just have any type of plane land on a carrier because it's a controlled crash. Navy ranks for Air Force officers and vice versa. All sorts of crazy stuff where it's like, okay, yes, this is before the days of Wikipedia, but Ian, go to the library.
There was something that was invented called the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Well, it just, just common things where it's like, you as a small, these guys that heard me talk earlier about, my novel that got destroyed, that was a World War III novel. As a high schooler, I took 3rd place in a contest writing a World War III short story that basically was better researched than Ian Slater's novels. I mean, that's not to toot my own horn, but that's just to say it's one of those things where if I can figure this out as a high schooler and you're doing this professionally, you know, that's a professional courtesy to your readers. And that's one of my big rules as an author is that you should have respect for your readers, that you're going to actually know what you're talking about or do the research of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, I completely agree that you don't necessarily have to have lived an experience to be able to write about said experience, so long as you do the research into that experience. And the reason I say that is because there are things that I cannot know. But by having gone through and researching every little thing about them, hearing firsthand accounts of them, you know, hearing from other people, by combining all of this together, I can give you an approximation that is going to be close enough. Am I going to hit everything? No. Is it better to read from somebody, you know, who has gone through combat? Maybe, but they're also coming from a place of trauma and writing about it.
Right.
Whereas I can come at it from any angle I want to, including trauma, because I've experienced great trauma in my life. I've had my life threatened before. I've had, you know, different things of this nature where, you know, you don't know whether or not you're going to live in the next 5 minutes. You know, and you can take those kinds of experiences, put them forward, and, you know, put that into your work. And I think that's what makes really good writing, is taking not only the emotions that you have and the emotions that you know need to go there, and then combining it with authenticity and accuracy and, you know, things like that. And I think you're going to have a really rich thing that anyone's going to read and love.
I was just thinking that sometimes an outsider can actually see a thing better than you can from the inside of it.
True.
I didn't know what made St. Louis until I lived in another part of the country. Because when you're living in an area, you don't know what... Here's a story. I was working at an Orthodox Jewish school. I'm not Jewish, but the little third graders were explaining to me what a bonfire was. Because they thought a bonfire was a Jewish thing.
Oh.
But again, when you're in something, sometimes you need to... An outsider can see things that you wouldn't see as an insider. So I think if you're going to write, I'd suggest, if you're going to write by another culture, I would suggest at the very least, have someone from in the culture read it for you. And have them give your honest opinion to make sure you didn't do anything extremely stupid. Like Hillel House. There was a Jewish student organization. By the way, I'm not Jewish, even though I'm talking about all these Jewish things. But apparently, they're only on college campuses. And someone that also wasn't Jewish was writing a story and had Hillel in a context that wasn't a college campus. And so when she had a Jewish friend read it, the friend pointed out, like, yeah, that doesn't exist, you know.
And this is why you need to be accurate, because if you're not,
Right.
somebody's going to pick up on it right away. I mean, we always joke at St. Louis Writers Guild when we talk about this. The big one is trying to shove a magazine up into a revolver.
Yeah.
You know, if you write that, you are going to have a ton of people go, you know, chuck your book away because it's now instantly stupid. You've proven you're an idiot. You know.
Or the other one I love, I'll let you keep going, but the other one I love is, and I've actually saw this was a third place winner in a magazine, I don't know if it still exists or not, short story. Let's put a silencer or suppressor on a revolver.
Yeah, that's the other good one.
Really?
Wait, I don't understand why this is bad because I don't do guns, so please explain.
So a revolver cannot hold a magazine because it's got a thing that revolves.
Oh, the bullets with the
Yeah,
circle
they've got
thing.
chambers that go around, not the clip that you pop out and slide back up in, and you know all that kind of stuff. So you're talking about two different types of guns, and any person who knows anything about guns is going to instantly know that.
So
The
it's
silencer
squaring
thing comes
around
in.
whole thing.
There are certain guns that are made to hold silencers, and there are certain guns that cannot hold silencers.
Right.
And revolvers would
Could
be
use a
one of them.
pillow. I mean, you
Oh, yeah,
could
yeah,
use
yeah.
silence.
Yeah, make your own
with the
silencer.
Use
revolver,
the corpse you're making.
you've got a space between the chamber and the barrel. Where's the sound coming from?
Yeah, the sound doesn't come out the end of the barrel.
No. So
It
that's
doesn't? Oh, man.
just
I thought it was a
a
sound
But these are all
bullet.
things. That's why you need to be accurate. That's why you need to do this research.
I'm going to say I'm glad you're talking about the research stuff because that's a rule which I left out. I try to be extremely accurate with what I can, with the science I have in my science fiction, with the murder information I have in my murder mysteries, and usually combining. And I try to go to the sources to get that information, and I'll break the laws of physics and chemistry and the science, not the real law.
Not the law. Don't you talk so
Not the law that's going to get me into the penitentiary.
Not on the podcast, dude. Not on the podcast.
It's like that
But the
person
laws-
like puts
all
their
the-
crime on YouTube.
I try to follow the theories, including of the soft sciences, of psychology, and so forth, unless it makes sense to actually break it for some reason. And it's unlike some of the space operas that you'll see out there nowadays. In fact, I'm to the point, and we talked about this before off mic. I've got a friend of mine who's a Chicago SWAT. He's also been he's been in combat overseas. He's also been a combat medic as well. He's also been an arson investigator. This guy has got multiple hats.
So basically, he needs to be writing stories.
He really does. Or he and I need to get together. Anyway, but his wife is also an ER doctor. In fact, written parts of textbooks and so forth. And sometimes I'll come to him with questions that will be about what I'm working on. And his wife honestly believes I'm very, very shady. She doesn't trust me. She doesn't trust it for a novel. So it happens.
I keep telling him he needs to get stuff published so his friend can show his wife.
Yes.
Yes.
See, this is why you were asking about me.
Yeah, ask her to be a beta reader. Then she's going to know it's definitely real, and also she has more input.
Yeah.
Yeah, assuming she has time.
Yeah.
Oh no, I just lost a thought.
Uh-oh, sorry.
So about
Thanks, sir.
that's what I was going to say about the research. So I'm glad you mentioned space opera because the space opera, for those who don't know, is it's a subgenre of science fiction. The way I explain it is hard sci-fi is Isaac Asimov, space opera is David Weber. And when what a space opera person says is, my character flicks a switch to progress the story. The hard sci-fi person explains why that switch works as part of progressing the story.
I usually explain it as Star Wars versus Star Trek.
Yes.
Yeah.
Star Wars has space magic, Star Trek has science.
Yes. And space wizards.
I'd actually put in one more because really in space opera there could be reasonably a hard science explanation.
Yes.
It's just not explained.
And that's
In space magic, there basically it doesn't make sense.
I counter with midi-chlorians, and that's the only time I'm going to use the prequels as a positive example.
wait, no.
No.
So, redirecting from where we were definitely going to go in this group. Speaking of research.
You saw the Cobra
Speaking
Hood?
of research. One of my rules is actually related to that. Always improve your craft and learn and research.
Yes.
And research for me is not only about how to make the story authentic in such and such way. It's also about other writers' processes and how to write better, studying the craft of writing. So right now I'm reading Nancy Kress's Beginnings, Middles, and Ends. I put it down for a while, and now I'm at the end, finding out how to make beginnings, middles, and ends work together better. And
So you have the ends of ends.
yes, she's divided it all quite nicely too. I love how it's structured. Just structured, and things that I'm learning, like structuring stories, is great. So you should always want to improve yourself as a writer. Always be willing to find out more about how other writers do things, be it their process or the craft. So many writing books, and you
Yes.
can learn from so many people. It might not always work for you what they do, but then you have something else in your toolbox.
Just real quick, that's also why I watched the J.J. Abrams version of Star Trek. It's reminders of what not to do. Go ahead.
So much shade.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to say, more shade than an oak tree.
Like you.
I mean, going to the next rule I have is learn to find the good in every criticism. This is one where people say, just to make sure we're clear, and yes, Anita, I am remembering our conversation we had after I told you this once. This is not saying have a thick skin. Skin you got is the skin you got by this point, most of us in our lives. I mean, if you got tissue paper skin, or you've got a blade of armor because your parents raised you that way, either way, that's how you're going to be. This is basically saying, if you have something that crushes your psyche, have your good cry, smash your plate, do whatever you got to do to get it out of your system, but then go back and look at it. You can usually find something good in even the most banal criticism. With me, I sent a book to a website, and I should have known better because the guy has a tagline that he hates books.
Oh.
Yeah, and so that was me to give him a review. And basically his review, one of the things he dinged me on when he gave me the 2-star review on Amazon, thanks for that, was well, this reads like bad fanfic. And if I'm going to read bad fanfic, I expect to have Q and Captain Picard going at it, and he was a little bit more blatant than that. But it was just, and, whenever this happens. Now, I went back and looked at what he said, and there were a couple things that he did, point out that I said, okay, I probably could have done that better. Now, I'll fix that for the next book. And then I just got over it. I mean, it's one of those things where I've always remembered it as a cautionary tale. Mm-hmm. But, it's one of those things where, okay, 1 and 2 stars are basically proof that, it's not just having all your friends and family, people you pay to review your book.
Mm-hmm. I want to add a thing to that before we move on to another. Yes, take all criticism, like consider all criticism. But one of my rules is there are some things I'm better off not knowing. And one of those things is the comment section of anything.
Yeah.
So when you put your book up on Goodreads, on Amazon, or anywhere, some people will give you reviews. And some people will just shit on you because they want to.
Yes.
And there are some things that I'm better off not knowing. People have told me these things, they've haunted me, and they haunt me because I know that they're not true. They're a purely subjective, not constructive thing. Yeah. But they stick like barbs in my brain, and I can't get rid of them. So I know where to find those things in the comment section. And I don't go there on purpose. Perhaps there's a gem in there somewhere, but I'm not willing to risk being told that I'm just basically bad at what I'm doing with no constructive criticism.
Yeah,
because that's the mental health for me.
Yeah.
I know that's gonna stick. And if there is a real problem with my work, then one of you guys or someone else that I trust hopefully will find it and give it to me in a way that is easier for me to process than you suck and here are the 3 reasons why. And maybe reason 3 has some validity. Oh, and your characters are really flat. Oh, I have flat characters? Well, I can take that and I can work with it. Well, that's 3 on the list of your face is ugly and your personality smells like feet.
Wow, they got all that from a book.
For comments.
So that was that.
I think Brad's next. And then...
I was just going to say, so I completely agree about the taking criticism. I've often said with Iron Horseman, there was a reviewer who caught something about my books that I actually knew existed. Hey, thanks, Pete. Caught that my characters don't get injured. And if they do get injured, it really doesn't affect them that much. And you know what? I like it. I have no problems with that, and I will own that. I write, kind of middle grade YA, so I'm writing, not your hard-hitting, craziness. And I will say, in later books, I did address that. So, Pete, you need to keep reading, and people do get injured, and it does have consequences. So,
thank you, and you're welcome.
But to throw that out, to jump into one of my other rules that I've thought of, is that I believe that you should write for yourself.
Yes.
And when I say that, what I mean is write the story you want to write.
Or you want to read. Write the story you want to read.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason for this is, yes, people are going to give you all kinds of advice when you start to sit down to write a book. But the point is that it needs to be your book. Now, when I say that, I'm also a person who believes in that I love the genre of which I'm writing in, and that I, all the genres that I write in, and I know the tropes, and I know the commonalities, I know what makes it steampunk. So there's always going to be that MacGyver A-Team style building scene in one of my books. My editors have tried to yank these out, and I'm like, no. There will be a scene where guys get together and start pounding metal and hitting rivets and doing all this kind of stuff. One, because I love the A-Team. Mm-hmm. Everyone loves the A-Team, and I love the idea of. Guys building something up and making kind of creating something out of nothing. And then having that in there, I also know that my audience is made up of a bunch of gearheads who want to take things and twist them into new things and make, cool guns out of Nerf guns. Or take that weird pipe and turn it into a grappling cannon. This is the world I live in. I know my people. So when I sit down to write, I'm writing things that I know they're going to love to read, and I know I'm going to love to read. And if an editor is like, this is kind of slowing down the motion, I'm like, I don't care. This is like, this scene needs to be here because it's steampunk.
Brad, why did you do this to me? We've got like a very finite amount of time left, and you just reminded me of three different tracks on my
And you're
list.
spinning it,
And I'm going to take
chewing
the
them out.
final word on this tonight, so go
I
ahead.
have something
Chewing
I
gum
want to
is
say
fun.
too.
Okay.
Do you want to go first?
No.
All right. So 3 different things. 1, write what you love, not what you think is quote unquote important with a capital I or that people will want to read. You have to write something that is fun for you and
Right.
be happy. Like, just play on the page. This is your story. So that was one of them. The other one was about character and relationships. Those are what drive your story. And if those aren't good, no one's going to care how great your plot is.
Amen.
You're
And,
singing my
um,
song.
And you need to understand your characters even if you don't love all of them. I think that's also important because people think with their own kind of logic. And it may not always be sane logic, but it's still logic. Speaking as a crazy person, I know this.
You know she threatened to kidnap me earlier.
Yeah,
I'm certifiable. I can't be held responsible for anything that comes out of my mouth. Yes, I can. I'm on meds. Anyway, and the third
Mommy,
thing,
I'm scared.
The third thing, I'm so sorry, you guys. I've run him off. Is
As my writers group in Topeka are all shaking their heads like, no, you don't understand.
So the third thing is about kind of our responsibility as writers. Brad, you mentioned the tropes of your genre, and this is related to that, and it has a story attached to it. So I wrote a romance story at one point. It was a gay romance where one guy pretended to be drunk so the other guy would drive him home. And they get to the one guy's apartment, and they're there, and the guy is suddenly definitely not drunk, and he's basically conned this guy into coming to his house so he will talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody at my table, like at the table at Clarion, had a problem with it except one person, and she said, I have been in that situation where someone has basically conned me into their house, and it is extremely uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It is not sexy in any way, shape, or form. It is scary, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I understand that this is kind of a trope in the romance genre, because it is, but as someone who has had that experience, it is none of those things that is portrayed as in that genre. And I had to step back and think about that, because suddenly I could see it as a different situation entirely. And like, it does make a difference when you're a woman and it's a man and someone who's bigger and stronger than you who's basically conned you into their house.
Mm-hmm.
But the rule that kind of came out of that was to question the traditional narrative of whatever it is you're writing. Is it a trope or a convention? Does it have to stay that way? Like, is it good or right or accurate? And is it fair? Is this representative of the population? I'm writing a story right now with 6 white protagonists. And the people of color are off stage for most of the story. And it's kind of weirding me out, because when I started that story, it never would have occurred to me that, that may not be the right thing to do anymore, that you can do something different. Because when I started writing it, it was before we need diverse books. It was before the talk of representation was really coming out. And I'm a queer woman of color, and it never would have occurred to me that I was allowed to be in my own story. So one of the things that I think about now as a writer is, what message am I sending by writing the story this way? Does it have to be written this way? Do these characters have to be written this way? And like, is this representative of the country that I'm writing it about? Like, is this representative of the American population? No, change it.
I have 2. I'll do the character one first. I'll be quick because it made me think of, it's not really one of my rules, but it's one that I have tried to internalize and I've extrapolated from. With the characters, when you develop your villain should be as well developed as your protagonist, because remember, if you flip this coin, we have a villain that, is your protagonist is the villain if they're telling their own story.
Right.
And so I made the joke earlier on my Facebook because I posted a meme about villains. I said, in a world full of Annies, be a Magneto. And then the second part of that,
I like that. Go on.
Now with representation, of course everybody can't see us here, but speaking of the whole of color, what I've said is number one, write your character should come to you as your characters come to you. With me, my book takes place in World War II. And I got that asked of me once. They said, "Well, why? Your book is World War II. Why are no people of color?" I said, "Well, because I'm writing a book about combat in World War II. It's not 1945, and it's not a ground combat. And second, I'll be honest. I grew up primarily in a small town of 2,000 here in Missouri. I've had people who've met me after reading my books, and they're like, oh, wow, because I obviously didn't look at my bio picture. They're like, I would have never thought that you were African American. I get that a lot. It happens. And that to me is, it kind of makes me say, well, these are people I grew up with. This is how I grew up. I always say, don't try to, when you hear representation, don't try to go outside your comfort zone or outside where the story is. Write your characters as they appear to you.
Yeah.
The story that I mentioned with the 6 white protagonists still has 6 white protagonists, and that's because I realized it is accurate to the social situation that they are from. And I also realized that if anyone was a person of color in that setting, it would basically be earmarking the entire group based on that character's actions. And there is not a character in there who I want to basically lump an entire group of based on their actions, because 4 of those people are reprehensible. 5 of those people are reprehensible. The other one has a brother who punched someone in the face. So there's not really, it's not a good, it's better to just leave it accurate to life and also not do that, because that's the message that I would be sending.
You and I are changing it, so.
Okay, so to kind of run off of that, the one thing, one of my main rules, if I had to say one, is to stay true to your story. Do not, it drives me crazy when I see authors that kind of go incredibly meta to the point where it is the deficit of the story itself, where it's like, okay, the story was great, and then you try to add on all this polarizing elements. Polarizing, there we go, that's the word. Polarizing political elements, and you just completely lose the story in it. So, or representation aspects, or things like that, and you completely lose your story in trying to get your voice out there. There's nothing wrong with getting your voice out there, but do it in a way that stays true to the story that you're trying to portray. And that's one of my pet peeves. But
So if your story is actually about a thing, write a story about that thing instead of trying to force that thing into your story.
yes.
I think if there's one rule that everybody, and not just writers, but everybody ought to follow, it comes from the legendary football coach of Ohio State, Woody Hayes. And he said, overcome resistance with persistence. And I think that is a great rule for everybody. Of course, he also said, you can't play football with an erection, so I'm not sure what to make of that.
I'm never going to have that problem.
That
Wow.
would be really uncomfortable, wouldn't it? Wow, you could write something.
Well,
In
no
ways you would not understand.
Yeah, not unless you've worn that cup.
I don't have research. I might be able to write as if I could.
I don't want to understand that.
I'm fascinated. Wow.
I've got.
Never would have thought that.
I'm gonna close this out with 2 rules.
With the story talking
So-
about having
somehow-
playing sports with a word.
Yeah.
That was the last line? I thought that was the last line.
Well, it's tempting, but I really do want to throw these 2 out. The first one's going to go a lot with what Kathleen and James and a lot of other people were talking about earlier, and that is, when I write, I respect my characters and I respect my audience. I do not want to create paper-thin characters of any kind, especially villains. And Brad will tell you, I know this person does not listen to our podcast, but will tell you about a certain time I got pounced on presenting a villain presentation. It was interesting, but anyway, villains do things. not because they're villains, but because there's a motivation behind it. And I want to respect that person, even if they are the most evil thing in the world. If you don't respect them, your audience will never respect them. And you need to respect your audience and respect what they expect from your story. I'll pause for my second one. Go ahead.
Melanie and I were talking about this last week. Ignoring the fact that your villain is your villain. Your villain is a person with passion. They have a passion for something. That's the reason why people fall in love with characters like in Breaking Bad, where Walter White is doing some really awful stuff, but he's our protagonist because he has passion and we can identify with someone who feels strongly and personally about a thing. It's different from being evil for evil's sake. It's
exactly.
Like, why is this person behaving the way they are? It might be an evil thing to us, but to him or her, it's very, very important. And that's what makes us relate to them. It's because we have something that's very important as well.
Walter White has to pay his medical bills.
Yeah.
He's got to provide for Skylar and her family.
Exactly. Yeah. And we can identify with that.
Hey, I would love to write my villains. Like, his story, like, retell my entire trilogy from the villain's point of view. That would be a great time.
Do it.
Okay, we're really over time. So
yeah.
Let me go ahead and then I'm going to do the final thing.
Yeah,
related to villains, something Octavia Butler's writing has taught me is not to pull punches. You love your protagonist, and that's good. But if you want to have a good story, you need conflict. And if you want to have a great story, you need to not pull punches. You just trust your protagonist will be able to get themselves out of the very deep hole you have just stuck them in.
Amen.
I never do anything bad in my stories.
You all see the grin. The final thing I'm going to do, I'm going to circle back to when I was talking about my rules earlier. You noticed that I said I write from X time to X time. Why? Because there's a time, I shut my writing off on purpose because there's time I want to spend living my life. Be that with my wife here or going out with her to do things or on my own to do things or whatever. Because while we can research our tail ends off on everything we write, and we don't always have to play dodgeball with bullets. By the way, I love that. Love that phrase. I'm borrowing it from here on out. Anyway, if you don't go out there and live, what possibly can you write about? And on that note, have a great week writing. Tune in next week for yet another interesting tale in the writing industry.
I won't be there for that one.
Don't send help for James, okay? He's fine.
My wife tells me all the time that I have the worst boss.
GatewayCon? What is GatewayCon? The Gateway to Publishing Conference and Convention, brought to you by St. Louis Writers Guild, is a new, unique experience for writers looking for their work to be either traditionally published, independently published, self-published, or to further their writing career. Coming in June 2017, GatewayCon will provide opportunities for writers to pitch their work to agents, hone their craft regardless if it is genre fiction or nonfiction, and obtain expert critiques. Get to meet vendors and experts who can help your writing get attention. And all writers get their work in front of their audience. Writers will get to network with agents, publishers, and others in your genre. Gateway to Publishing Conference and Convention will be in St. Louis, June 16th through the 18th, 2017. For more information, visit www.stlwritersguild.org or look for GatewayCon on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. GatewayCon, opening the gateway for writers to reach their readers.
Did you know that Right Pack Radio has an international audience? How would you like to reach that audience in regards to your books, your book services, your author services, or more? Go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com and look under advertising for more information. If you don't have a script, that's not a problem. We will be happy to work with you. Once again, go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com for more information.
The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.